Welcome to the Smart Influencer podcast. If you're tired of chasing algorithms, second guessing your strategy, or feeling like you're doing all the things without seeing the growth you want, you're in the right place.
We're your hosts. I'm Christina,
And I'm Corinne.
and we're bloggers, business owners, systems nerds, and founders of the Smart Influencer. Between the two of us, we've built multiple six-figure brands, launched digital products, hosted live events, and coached creators who are ready to level up.
Each week, we break down what's actually working in today's creator economy, from monetization and list growth to systems, automation, and building a business that doesn't own you. Because this isn't about hustling harder.
It's about building smarter. Let's get into it. Welcome to the show, Sam. Why don't you tell our listeners a bit about yourself?
Hi, my name is Sam, and it's lovely to be on the podcast again. And I have been in the kitchen gadgets recipe field since 2011 or 2012. I can't quite remember, it's been that long. And I started out, like most of us, with food blogs. And then I realised that there was no air fryer cookbooks out in the UK. So I decided to go looking for a literary agent and a publisher. And this led to me selling more than 250,000 copies, becoming a double Sunday Times bestseller. And now I'm right in the process at the moment of book number 4.
That's awesome.
That is
That's awesome.
fantastic. That is quite the literary resume that you have built up there.
It is.
Thank you.
So we had Stephanie Moon on before talking all about publishing from like farther down the track, like about promoting your cookbook after it's published and everything that goes into that and why you might want a literary agent. So we've kind of dug deep on this, but like now, like Christine, I think you mentioned this. We're going to back up a couple steps,
Yeah.
and talk about like, okay, now I'm a blogger. We listened to that episode. I think I can do it. I think I want it for these reasons. So from the blogger perspective, how do we actually do it, right? Like,
Yeah.
so what was step one?
Step one is very much looking for a literary agent. I know it puts off many people because they think, right, they're getting a percentage of the money, but a literary agent has much better connections. So they'll also already have relationships with publishing houses. So it's not like going out and cold and call the publishing houses. And even though the literary agent takes a percentage, often get you that percentage or more than that percentage in a higher publishing deal compared to what would happen if you went out there on your own. So, for example, you might get 85% if you get per book sale, you went there on your own. But with literary agent, they might get you $1.25 and then they might get 15. So you're still better off with literary agent than you are doing it on your own. And then, literary agent here in the UK, we have what we call writers' access, and it's like Yellow Pages, and it's a big textbook, and it's not just for finding literary agents; it's also got agents for people that are wanting to get into TV and film and things like that. And I just had a look through it, and it often says the credentials. So it will say under each literary agent who they've published books for. So if you feel like they've got one that's, I wouldn't say competition to you because they will not take on the competition to one of their other authors, but one where you know that they can get you a deal because they've got experience across a similar niche. And then you can start literally emailing out literary agents with a nice cover letter. And a lot of literary agents are only interested in signing people that are very experienced in the niche because they want that person to be the authority of that niche. So you need to make sure you sell yourself as being an authority and knowing what you're talking about. Like they would take on somebody that was really good at baking and that had a really good baker's followers, but they didn't really understand the basics of baking and their recipes aren't very good quality, then they've got no chance.
Mm. Okay, so finding an agent is key, right? Because it's going to help you get more doors open. And if I am understanding you correctly, then the fee they're going to negotiate for you would pretty much cover their fee plus
Right, because they'll get a
some for
better
you.
deal.
Yeah, better than what we would get had we tried to attempt this on our own.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And because they've got experience working with the other cookbook authors, they will be able to give you decent advice and
Mhm.
tell you what's going on in the industry at the time if you need it and if you ask for it. And they've just often got a much better experience. Um, my literary agent, for example, she was originally a publisher, so she understands the industry really well as well, which always helps.
And I would assume that they would give you advice to make the process going to go so much easier than if you were trying to navigate that all on your own. You know, like the insider kind of like insider tips and tricks to make the process as seamless as
Yeah,
possible.
yeah, absolutely. And then they get you ready to pitch to publishers, and that's pretty much like doing a CV, but your literary agent is helping you do a CV. So it's showing off your best recipes. So you might she might say, right, 6 recipes that are really going to sell you and get you a cookbook deal, but also note that publishing houses' email accounts are very low, so you can't have one that's got a lot of megabytes going across email. So it looks very boring and very basic what actually gets sent. It's not like something flashy, like a flashy presentation or anything, you know.
Yeah.
So I have a question. So the literary agent only gets paid from the fee, right? Like you don't pay them out of pocket for any of their time. So I would think as an agent, I'd be picky about who I'm working with because I want to make sure there's a payday on the end of any hours I put in. So how hard is it to secure the agent? Like what do you do to sell yourself to convince them that you're, especially if you haven't ever published before? I imagine it's easier if you somehow got one out the door without having had an agent, so you have some proof of concept. But I'm a new blogger that wants to publish a cookbook. I'm looking for an agent. I've never published anything. Like, how do I sell myself? What are they looking for?
I think a lot of it's your ability to be able to sell it as well. So if you've got a high traffic food blog, then of course it's very easy to sell it. In the UK at the moment, the majority of cookbook authors, new ones, tend to be ones that have got a really big social media influence. So then they can use the social media to then sell their books. So they're looking for how sellable you are. And that's why they would never take a brand new food blogger, for example. But if you know the niche well and you've got a decent following or a decent amount of traffic, then you're sellable. But also, a lot of us food bloggers, we all have our sales funnels as well, don't we? You know, with the small ebooks that we sell, all the digital products we tend to have built up. Even showing off those sales of what you're actually capable of through your emails and even through affiliate marketing just shows that you've actually got the credentials to be able to do it.
Right. So, and I think this was something Stephanie mentioned too, like
Yes.
having that network in place that once you get published, you can actually promote and sell the book. And because that falls on your shoulders.
It's interesting to me because it's such a, like, it seems like I don't know which one's the cart and which one's the horse, right? Like, because it sounds like you need to have a huge audience that you could sell to in order to secure someone that will help you sell cookbooks. Like, so in my mind, I kept, like, I think taking it back a couple interviews, right? Like, in my mind, it was, you find like a publisher or you find an agent that will then take care of that for you. But the way you find them is to be able to sell it on your own. Like it's weird. Oh,
Yeah, it is. But you know, at the end of the day, publishing houses want people who've got a big audience and that they're going to sell the book for them. You know,
right.
they're willing to to outlay for the money and the costs involved in making a book. But at the end of the day, the bulk of the responsibility for actually selling the books is really on the author.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what Stephanie was saying,
Yeah.
you know, and
Because they
why.
have the distribution warehouses, like they can get it into the big sellers, but we've got to push people to go to the store to ask for it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. So,
interesting.
okay. So we found like let's just assume we found, a listing of agents that we can reach out to. I'm assuming there's some sort of vetting process, like you don't just want to work with any old agent on the list. Like I would assume you have to have some sort of be able to build a rapport with them. Do you interview them or just take whoever will take you?
Yeah.
How
Well,
desperate are we
well,
at this point?
well, when I did it, I reached out to I think about 5 agents at the time, and the one I went with was the first one that actually said yes. But she had great credentials. She had a lot of Sunday Times best-selling authors already in the UK. And what I liked about her is that she had a mixture already of food bloggers and influencers, whereas a lot of the agents were more your typical celebrity chefs only and were less likely to be able to know what to do with a food blogger. Because in the UK, there's not as many food bloggers as what there is in the US, you see. So it's not as well known kind of thing. Social media influencers and bringing out books has become the norm the last couple of years. But before 2 years ago, it would have been very hard to actually do it. And I remember another literary agent turned me down. And the reason she said was, which still amuses me now, she said there was no market for the air fryer and that people wouldn't be interested in an air fry book.
You showed them.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. It's like that scene from
Pretty
Pretty Woman.
Woman. Yep, that's
Well,
exactly like
question,
that.
right?
I hope you sent her like your press release when you made your Sunday Times bestseller list.
Oh, that's funny.
Well, it's funny thing is, she then signed an influencer for an air fry baking cookbook about 2 years after me. And it didn't sell.
Yeah.
Well,
Which
see, everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
it does,
So,
doesn't it?
so when you reach out to an agent to pitch them your idea, what should go into that pitch? Like, how do you like? What do you like? What do you say? What do you ask them? How do you format that? Is it just like a simple email? Like, what goes into that?
I would say a simple email and then a short attachment. You don't want it to be massive. So I would say no bigger than what a normal CV size would be. Um, but I think the most important things that they want to know is what your audience is, how well you know your audience, and your own reach and your own achievements as far as your food blog is concerned, because quite a lot of us have achieved some great things, you know. So if you've been featured in major newspapers and magazines, include kind of that kind of thing. Some sample recipes always helps because then they can see the kind of thing that you do. But my agent, she knew how well I knew the air fryer audience. She knew I was the first to the air fryer audience, and she knew that I knew what I was talking about. So, but I think with these agents, the publishers, when you're reaching out to them, how many emails and messages they must get per day. So, like reaching out for PR, they haven't got time to read really long messages. So, to just kind of get to the point. And they kind of like it, like when you do PR, where you say, "Oh, I found you because of so and so,"
Mm.
and quite a lot of your favorite authors will also have a thank you page in their cookbooks, and it'll mention who their literary agents actually is in that. So that's
Oh,
another way that you can find a good literary agent as well.
There's the golden nugget right
yeah.
there in this
There it
episode, I
is.
think.
That's helpful.
That is the
So
golden
when
nugget.
you were talking about the attachment, is that like essentially the literary agent version of like a media kit? Like what for those of us that do sponsorships, it would be something that kind of highlights all of those numbers for them in a quick, visually easy to absorb format. Is that the attachment you're talking about in the email?
Yes, and I would also include some of your best recipes.
Okay.
And if you've had a if your field where you want to bring out a cookbook in, so let's say it's, I don't know, sourdough making is going to be your niche that you want to bring up a book. You can show off your best sourdough content that you put on your blog. And if any of it's gone viral, or let's say you do really well for your search engine optimization traffic, you could say, right, I get 500,000 views a month for sourdough content. I could, of course, include links to my books in my old content, blah, blah, blah. You know, the general idea of, because they want to know that you're going to be successful, really. They don't want another dud. And, you know, it's like with a literary agent and with a publishing house, they're probably going to have 10 bestsellers, the ones that bring in the most of the money. And you don't want to become just one of the ones that you've got a beautiful shiny book at the end of it, but you have hardly sold any copies.
Yeah.
So, question, Sam, and if it's too like, it's not necessarily personal, but if you don't want to answer it, you can do it in generalities. But because Christine and I, the publisher that we worked with when we published our books, like the way that it was, we don't get royalties on residual. Is that right for you too, Christina? That you don't like, so if something sells like hotcakes now, like we got paid for doing the cookbook and like we negotiated that rate and that was it. So I'm assuming that when you're working with an agent and a publisher, that's not your arrangement, right? Like every book that sells, you're making more money. On average, can you tell us like what are you like what does a person like I won't ask you specifically, but what would someone listening to this, what would be a reasonable amount they can expect to take home for each book that's sold if you're doing it via a publisher?
Well, generally speaking, you expect to sell whatever number of books you do. It's an average thing that you would make a dollar or just over a dollar, about £1 per book, which is about $1.35, I think. So imagine you do that. If you actually ask publishers what they consider to be a success is a book that sold 30,000 copies or more.
Okay.
So if you think about it from those kind of numbers, then from a book, you should be expected to earn about $35,000 or thereabouts from a book that has done okay. I mean, that's not amazing numbers, but that's
Right.
still a nice passive income with everybody complaining that ad income because of AI and everything else is dropping. It's a good income to have. But I remember you were probably under the same publishing house, I'm assuming. There was a publishing house a while ago in the US. They did approach us about doing Instant Pot and Air Fryer books, and we said no because we wanted the long-term royalties income, and they were offering similar to yourselves, where it's just, but you're basically just a ghostwriter in a way, aren't you? Because you're just
Yeah.
writing the text, and then you're kind of done. And I know there was quite a few people that had that in the US.
Yeah.
Whereas in the UK, I'm not aware of anybody that's been under that kind of deal. In the UK, you get an advance, and then you get the advance on signing publishing deal, on sending in your recipes, and on the date of publication. So it's split into three.
Right.
And then let's say that's $10,000. Then let's say you've made 10,000 in royalties. So, you wouldn't have even had to sell 10,000 copies to hit that level. Then you'll start getting your royalties, and your royalties in the UK are paid out twice a year. So January to June is paid out in kind of September, October, and July to December is paid out in March.
That's just standard for all publishers? Like that's not each
Yeah,
publisher does it different?
that's pretty much standard, yeah, across the UK.
Interesting.
I don't know what it's like in the US, but I know of those that have published in the US, and they say it's twice a year, so it's probably a similar kind of system. But I'm with a publishing house, Quarter, and they also publish in the US as well as the UK. So mine is kind of grouped together, so I can see what is US sales, what's UK, what's Australia, that kind of thing.
Okay, so I'm curious, do you sell more in the UK or in the US?
UK.
Interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But all our recipes have both metric and imperial measurements in them. So I hate it in a recipe. US, when they're doing US measurements, because it's mainly in cups. I hate it in a cookbook when it reads 1 cup plus teaspoon. I want it to be 11 cups. I just find it irritating, and it reads really badly in a cookbook. So I always, yeah, I do. I don't like it. I don't like it when I don't mind cups, but when it's like a cup and another measurement, and when you've got metric written in there as well, it just becomes so
It's busy.
long-winded.
Yeah.
Yeah. So whenever I do my measurements, I always measure in US first, because it's not going to make any difference to a UK person if a recipe says 100 grams versus if it says 95 grams, because we all use weighing scales, so it really doesn't matter. So I always measure first in imperial and then do the metrics. So I have both in there. because we've got people in Canada as well, Australia, and then it's the same look of the book with the measurements throughout. The only difference with the US version is that it's paperback, and in the UK it's always hardback cover, which is probably weird to yourselves, but quite like the paperback though.
Interesting. Okay, so we have identified who we want as an agent, right? We identified them, we sent the email, they've brought us on. What can we expect as being our next step?
Waiting and hoping. I'm not joking. I'm not joking because it's then the agent's job to reach out to publishers. And I found out since that it could go to a publisher, they can think, yeah, I really fancy doing a book on that, but then they've got to take it to a board meeting to get all the approval for budgets and everything. So it's a long process. So I think it was a good 6 weeks from me actually contacting a literary agent to the point of speaking to my publisher for the first time on the telephone of her wanting to sign me. So yeah, it's that waiting game. It's that horrible feeling, isn't it? Thinking, is this going to happen? Is it not going to happen? And such like.
Okay, so then once you do get a publisher, right? We've waited, we've patiently waited.
Patiently waited.
We've signed. What can we expect? Like how does this workflow play out for us? Because we've heard from other people, like we've had on the podcast and just in conversations with other bloggers who have been published, that there is a lot of work that goes into it, and it's a labor of love. So how much, like what kind of workload can we expect to land in our laps?
A crazy amount of work. I'm sat here with an energy drink.
Don't sugarcoat it.
It's a lot of hard work. It really is. You really got to want it. You notice so many food bloggers that do it. They'll go silent and they won't put any content out on their blog for 6 weeks because they just cannot handle the severe level of work that's involved. I mean, it starts off with testing the recipes, of course. Oh no, I should backtrack a bit. Before that, you're speaking to a publisher and they're telling you how it works and everything, because if you're totally new to it, then they need to teach you everything that goes into it. Or they tend to just give you a summary. So you really don't know what you're jumping into when you first do it, I must admit. And then they want a recipe list. So they want an idea of chapters, what's the titles of the chapters, and then you write down a recipe list and you think, my recipe list is amazing. And then they'll say, don't like this, don't like that, can you change that, can you do a spin on this, and can you do a spin on that? And before you know it, you're thinking, I don't actually recognize my recipe list now, but it sounds so much better, so I don't mind. It's like having somebody else by your side helping you. It's like that extra hand at that point, which you'll never get that from self-published. You'll never get that perfection that goes into it. And then after that, you'll be signing contracts and you'll be starting to cook. So you have a crazy amount of cooking to do. And I mean, a lot of cookbooks have between 100 and 120 recipes in them. So imagine if you triple tested all those, and then imagine if you wanted to add in some variations. So, if it was a chicken casserole in a certain sauce, you might want to put a note at the bottom. If you wanted to use a different sauce, use these ingredients. And that recipe process is tiring. It really is. And I'm saying that for somebody that's married to a chef, so he can do a lot of the prep for me, so he can speed me up. But a lot of food bloggers are on their own. They don't really have that help and support. And then after recipe testing, your next process is it goes to an editor. And it can be a shock to the system when an editor first looks at your recipes, because it looks like they've rewritten the entire thing that you've done, and you're like, what? And it's kind of about finding an editor that will keep your voice and not just make you sound generic like every other cookbook. So I've been very lucky in the sense that they kept in my sense of humour, my personality, but at the same time, recipes have been altered and whatnot. And then after that, you have your photo shoot. And that's when a food stylist is going to design, and then a photographer is going to photograph all the photos that are going to be in your book. And for us, that was 2 weeks. And each week was 4 days where you're in the studio from like 9 o'clock until 6 o'clock. And it's very stressful because at the time for me, the lady in question had never used an air fryer before. So you can imagine how that went, can you?
So is
Now, were
this
you there on site when they were doing the photos?
Yes, yes. I highly recommend being on site for every moment of your photo shoot, because otherwise food stylists are known for changing the recipe or not reading it right or styling it in a way you wouldn't want it styled. So for example, if you wanted a picnic look to a recipe, you want to be there to make sure they actually do that picnic look or however you want it. Or you know, from an air fryer point of view, I want golden chips. So a food stylist are known for undercooking food to make it look better. And I'm like, hang on a minute, you need to put those on for a little bit longer to make those chips a bit more golden. So, if you're not there, you can tell the difference with a cookbook that comes out when the author's not there compared to one that has.
I think this comes back to what you said about the agent too, because one of the things that Stephanie brought up was like one of the things you give up when you work with a publisher is a lot of control, like a lot of that creative control. And so if it really matters to you, like it sounded like, well, forget it if you're working with a publisher, but I'm assuming like this is where the agent like really advocates for you to make sure that that sort of control is written into whatever your agreement is. Is that right?
Yes, but your contract actually does say that the publisher has the final say in everything.
Hmm.
But they don't mind changing it a bit to keep you happy.
Okay.
But you need to be there from the start to be able to say, right, things like, I want 2 plates of food for this recipe because it's a 2 person instead of a one single plate showing up on the photograph. So you do get a certain level of control. But other things you kind of think to yourself, well, that's not exactly how I would have done it, but it's not important enough for me to complain and say, well, actually, can you
Right.
change it? I think it depends on how much it means to you for it to be changed. I
Right.
mean, on my current book, I've got the American classic pulled pork in there. The food stylist in question is very, very healthy, and I don't think she's ever had pulled pork before. So
Hmm.
she served it up without any burger buns. So I'd asked her to change it to include a burger bun because I just thought it was weird. They just the
Right.
meat on the plate and the chips, I just thought it was a bit odd. So that was the kind of thing that I've asked to be changed.
Mm. So the photographer and food stylist, is that coming out of your contracted amount, or are you supposed to identify, who this photographer is and food stylist, or is this something your publisher takes care of?
It's something your publisher takes care of. If for any reason you are a professional food stylist, you can opt, if they're willing to do so and they like your photographs, they are willing to give you a higher advance for you to actually deal with it. But it's very rare that ever happens in the UK. It's normally for cookbook authors that do a lot for magazines and for the press. You
Right.
know, ones that write for the magazines basically that are not really food bloggers, the more professional food stylists, if you
Right.
like. It happens a few times like that, but most of the time, your only costs are covering the food to make the recipes with prior to the food shoot. And I always find that you end up with a ridiculous amount of leftovers of food when you're doing a food shoot, because let's say you've got 3 recipes in the book with garlic powder in, and then they buy a big jar of the stuff. It just seems like a waste to me. So I will say, right, I'll bring my leftovers in of X, Y, and Z, and then it's not coming out of their budget or my budget. And then if there's any food for the photo shoot that I've had to go and buy myself, I'll just hand in my receipts at the end for that, and then they'll reimburse me for any food that I've bought. For example, in this one, they're harder to get hold of in the UK compared to in the US. Cornish game hens. They couldn't get any. They could only get them at a wholesale place that I go to. So I'd gone and got those, given them a receipt, and they reimbursed for those. So it's just been a handful of things like that, but most of the costs fall on the publishers.
Okay. All right, so that's good to know. So we've secured the publisher, we secured our agent, secured our publisher, we've turned in our recipes, we've photographed everything.
We've showed up at the shoot to
Yeah.
make sure things go according to plan.
What's next?
Next is the food stylist saying that didn't work, retest it.
So you're going back to the drawing board a couple of times.
Yeah. Or it's more so that I like it so that if it's served with something, which is the food stylist styling the food to however they want it, if they've changed the recipe a bit, I want that photograph and the ingredients and the method to match. So let's say they've decided at the photo shoot you've done a soup recipe. Let's add some kale to it to give it a bit more green. Then I will go back, I'll do the soup again, and I'll add in some kale so that I can make sure the measurements and everything matches.
Gotcha.
And I'll maybe do about 10 recipes from the book altogether again. Or I might just be changing things up. For example, the Cornish hens that we did for the book. It was originally written in the cookbook, in the actual recipes we sent in, for one Cornish hen. But we had a whole chicken picture the page before, so I just thought it didn't look great. So the photo shoot, we changed it to 2 Cornish hens, but it's an instant pot recipe. So that meant you had more fat dripping off the Cornish hens, and the sauce that we were cooking with at the same time was a bit thinner. So we retested that the other day to make sure that the sauce was right, because we'd increased it to 2 Cornish hens rather than 1. So it's just silly little things like that you could do all of the ones that need doing in the book in a single day. It's not a big job compared to when you originally recipe tested them.
Right.
So I imagine, though, through this entire process, one of the skills you need to have is a thick skin.
Yes. Yeah, really thick skin. I mean, for my first book, I was doing the cake. So I had a cake recipe in it. And then I brought it to the studio and they said, that's not the style of cake we want. And they did their own. And I just spent a whole day doing this cake and getting it styled and everything for the shoot. And, you're like, oh no, did that seriously just happen? But yeah,
wow.
it's a shock to the system. For a lot of people, when you haven't worked because they're your babies, are all these recipes, and then you've got someone else cooking your babies, and you've got to know when is a good time to fight it and to say, well, actually, no, a recipe doing like this. Whereas the times where you think, oh, it's no big deal, it's just a slight change or whatever, but it's knowing what you need to actually stand up for yourself to, and other things you don't.
Okay, that's good to know. That's I think a good insider piece of advice there.
Well,
So,
and listening to that though, I want to pause just a second. Listening to that, I want to know if this is true, your experience having published multiple cookbooks now. Listening to you and listening to Stephanie, what my takeaway is, one of many, is that it's very time intensive. So like to me, I feel like I would have come in if I was doing a cookbook and had like a certain number in mind of hours based on how many recipes it was and how long it takes me to develop a recipe. And then I would have calculated roughly how many hours that would take me. And that would be my time estimate for what this project was going to take me. But based on all these little things, like showing up at the shoot, and then like this day that you spend a whole day doing something, but then it has to be redone, or you've got to do like retest recipes, would you say roughly double? Like whatever your original estimate is coming in, like if you were just going to prepare these recipes and do your own cookbook and like throw it, like put it together in a PDF, is it roughly double, triple, quadruple? Like how much bigger is the time like on the tail end of it versus what your expectation was coming in as an experienced cook, knowing how long it takes you to make a recipe?
Don't think I ever gave it an estimate from the start, Maybe that was me being naive, but I never actually thought about it. But I think looking back now, you're talking 8 to 9 weeks of working from the moment you wake up in the morning to the moment you go to sleep on a night. And I would say takes into editing afterwards, which obviously we haven't talked about yet, from the start of planning the recipes and such like. But if you're on your first book, you're often taking to the cookbook your best recipes. So there's some that you would test against just so that you can get the measurements right, but that you've done and you could probably done when you've had a few drinks or whatever, or when you're tired, you know. Whereas when you're doing book number 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever, you know, that's brand new from the brain or starting from scratch. That I think it is actually easier when you're on your first book as far as time's concerned.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot
That
of
makes
sense.
Okay.
You know, by book 4, you've tapped out
Right.
your
Now
resources.
they are new recipes. Yeah, you've given all the ones you had up here already.
Yeah, especially when you're
Okay.
thinking 100 recipes in a book. I mean, you're at like 400 and 500 recipes at this
Yeah.
point. Yeah.
Okay, that's encouraging.
Yes, and I would say the worst thing about follow-up cookbooks, which has kind of taken me a few to get used to, you know, of course you've got your second album syndrome because you've already done a book, so you kind of think to yourself, what else going to make this second one great when the other one was such a big hit? But I think the worst thing is that my publisher has taught me so much about the publishing world, so I owe a lot to her. But it's like she's always telling me, well, what happens if somebody's first book of yours is the second book? So you have to imagine they haven't got your first book, so you have to go over stuff you put in your first book, but you have to do it in an original way so that people that bought your first book and buy your second book don't feel like they're getting ripped off, basically.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, especially if you're doing, like you said, you know, 2 air fryer cookbooks back to back, you know, putting that basic information in there.
I mean, I even see that in some of the like I read a lot. So, but in some of the fiction series that I do, like Janet Ovanovich, I love like they're fun little quick reads, but like she's like the character is a female bounty hunter who's like just kind of a bumbling fool. So she's adorable. But like they're numbered. Like the first one is 1 for the money, 2 for the dough, 3 to get deadly, I think something. But they're numbered. So you would assume someone starts with 1, but she doesn't assume it. So like she has to kind of reintroduce who all the main characters are. But what you're talking about, a little bit different each time, so that you could pick up book 16 and still kind of have a sense of what's happening in the story without having read the first 15 books. That seems like a creative challenge.
Yeah, it is. But when air fryers and instant pots, where you're expected to do the most popular foods that people want to learn how to cook in them, it means that, you know, you've got to be a bit creative. It's like book 2, 3, and 4 all have cheesecake in. So we've got a Biscoff cheesecake in one. We've got an Oreo chocolate one in another, and then we've got a vanilla one with your strawberry Kool-Aid in the other one. So we've still kept those cheesecakes all different, but it's the challenge of, you know, making sure that you're keeping everybody happy, both your returning customers and your brand new ones.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense.
So can we talk a little bit about like the timeline, start to finish? What kind of time are you investing into this process? From like when you sign to when your book hits the shelves.
Yeah, let's make sure no one ever wants to publish a cookbook. Let's hear it.
We're going to talk you right out of it right now.
Yeah. Well,
no, we're keeping it real.
Eyes wide open. That's what we're aiming for. Come in eyes wide open.
Yeah. Well, a shout out to the food hussy, Heather. She listens to the podcast. She heard my other one that I just done. And we were both doing an air fryer cookbook at the same time. And she was like, I'm never doing one again. And I said, I'm never doing one again. She stuck to her goals and everything. And she says, oh, which cookbook are you on now? Oh, number 4. But yes, it's a long process. But yes, so I would say that it's a 5 to 6 month process of working, but it's not all labor intensive for the whole of that time. So of course it starts with creating the recipes for the book. So depending on the publishing deal you've got, you could have anything for the average seems to be 6 weeks, but I've taken less before because I've backtracked the dates with my publisher and said, right, I want this book out in time for Christmas so that I can have the Christmas market. And she's like, well, that means you've got to have all the books in and all the recipes for the book in 4 weeks. And I'm like, I'll do that just to be able to get the Christmas market, because that's when you can make the most money from cookbook sales. So there's that part of it first. And then that's recipe testing and writing up the recipes for the first time. What I often used to do, and still do actually, is I write up my recipes on my tablet, on Google Docs, on an evening while I'm watching TV for what I've cooked that day, so that I've not then got to lose another week to just being sat in front of a laptop writing them all up. And plus, they're fresher in your brain at that point because you've just cooked them. So I found that easier for me. So you've got that time period. And then it goes to the editor, and the editor has a few weeks to read through them all. So you do tend to get a bit of a break to find your feet and breathe again during those couple of weeks. But it depends on the contract, because in my first 3 books, I had to have the chapters in stages. So it'd be like 25% of the book, then 25%, 50% kind of thing. But this time it was just 100%, and I was given one date because I'm assuming I've done a few books now. So that meant that it was going to take longer to edit an entire book, you know. So I felt like I got about a 2 weeks rest during that. And that actually fell on Christmas just gone. So that was nice because I got Christmas off with the kids. And then she'd send me what they call queries. So it's loads and loads of questions about the recipes. Are you sure you want to put this in? Where's this missing ingredient from? Why do you use this ingredient? And a lot of the questions are, they call it this in the UK. Can we call it what it's called in the UK? And then put / the US equivalent, because I cook too much for a US audience. So I, even though I'm British, seem to write in US all the time. She's always putting me in the other way around. She's saying, you've got to put it like that. So it's just general inquiries about recipes and things like that. And then between then and the photo shoot, those recipes are copied and pasted by the designer into a PDF template, which is the design of how the cookbook is actually going to look. And we've had it where it's happened after the photo shoot, but when she does it before, there tends to be more typos because she really doesn't have long to do it in, which isn't fair on the designer, really, but you want it there for the photo shoot. And then you have your 2-week photo shoot. And then that brings me to, I'm just looking on my diary. That was 2 weeks ago, my photo shoot ended. So then after that, I've got a printout of the entire cookbook so that I can read through it, see what errors need fixing and things like that, and give her biggest edit back. So that's when I send a really long Word doc and say, on page so-and-so, it should say this, etc. And then at the same time, it's this same time frame that I use for retesting it. And the way I do it, because one of the editors doesn't like this, but it's an agreement I have with the publisher, which I believe makes my books better, is the how-to chapter I do at the beginning. I have a 2-week delay in handing it in from when the photo shoot ends. So that's due in on Thursday. And that takes me quite some time to write. So that's what I've been doing at the moment. So that's like, this book's based on the Instant Pot. So it's how to use an Instant Pot and all people's questions and such like about it. So I've been working on that. And then, of course, reading the entire book. And then the work becomes less and less because I'll send edits in to her. And then she'll send me the latest PDF of the book. I mark off which ones have been done. We see what list we've got left. And then the husband prints it out. And between me and my husband and some friends and our son, we all read through it, get a pen, and we note down any extra errors we see, because at that point, you're just looking for typos. So we do a few rounds of those, but that's just like reading a cookbook. So it's not a lot of work, you know, that's 4 nights a week when the kids have gone to bed kind of thing.
Right.
And then after that, It's just final edits that you've spotted. So again, you're just repeating the same thing of checking for typos and any errors that you've noticed. And then after you've checked all these edits and errors, it then goes to they then say, right, that's it now. You can't make any more changes, even though I want to, because there's always something else I think about or want to add or whatever. And then it goes to the nutritionist, and because we have calorie counts in ours, and she goes through the entire book, checks all the ingredients, does the calorie counts, and then a proofreader checks it again, and then the proofreader will come back with their own queries that they have about the book, which is just generally little things because the editors normally caught most of it by that point. I can't even remember any of the ones that the proofreaders brought back, to be honest, because they're just silly little things that don't really matter, and you think, oh right, I missed that, but I think most people reading the book wouldn't notice them.
Right.
And then after that, the publisher has the last read through, I have the last read through, and then it goes to the printers. So in that last 6 weeks or so, you're probably only working 10 hours on the book in total in that last 6 weeks. So you could go back to food blogging during the day and just checking on your book on an evening when you're watching TV. It's not too bad at that point. And then for the UK books, they're nearly all published in China, or printed in China, sorry, I should say. So what happens then is they go to the printers in China. You don't have to do anything then until it comes to actually marketing of the book. So, for example, this one will be going to the printers in March. We're on a September release date. So then I'm just thinking about what content I'm going to create that will be ranking in Google or in YouTube in time for actual publication date. And then you're kind of done. So you only really have a 3 months of the year process of time that you have to worry about when it comes to doing cookbooks.
And I'm assuming if you're strategic about it, like the marketing part, you could get help with somebody like Stephanie, if you really need that kind of help. But you can also like front load it, right? You can plan that out and get some of that planned out, scheduled, written, so that when it comes time to market it, it's really just plugging and playing. Like you're not reinventing the wheel and starting from scratch.
Well, and like you said, Sam, if you're going to make like if this is a thing, like this is gonna be a new revenue channel for you. Like you want to put out, let's say, an annual cookbook. So that 3 months that you're working, you could every other recipe that you're just making for yourself or doing, you're just taking those notes so that when you get to that really intensive 6 week period, it's like half the work.
Yeah.
So you're kind of working year long on the cookbook, but not really. Um,
Yeah, I noticed that a lot of cookbook authors, they treat it a bit like when us ladies go on maternity leave. So for their own food blogging website, they'll have the content written up 3 or 4 months in advance so that they can just focus on the cookbook, and
right.
then they're still ahead of time by the time they're ready to go back to it.
That makes sense. Just being a little bit organized about it and strategic, I guess, is
Right. That reminds me, Christina, I'm not pulling the name, but we'll link to it in the show notes. We did an episode with a woman who takes every summer off. And so she talked about her routine and her schedule for like planning that and batching her work so that she really could. She takes a full 3 months off every year. So I think that would be helpful for this element of that. You could do
right.
that in advance of doing your cookbook.
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
Lynn April.
That's
She
right.
talked about how to take summers off.
yeah, I've also done similar because we went traveling around Europe in the summer. So we were away for the whole 6 weeks of the school year when they have the break for the summer, because in the UK it's later than yours. And I had my content about 7 weeks ahead. But I also did some extra recipes using the local food when I was away as well, and took the pictures on my mobile phone. So then I had some recipes for the month I was back. But yeah, I've done similar as well, and it's nice to do that. I mean, it's great for maternity leave as well. And then another thing I actually do off the back of the cookbook is there's a lot of food waste when it comes to food shoots. And they've been very kind of my publishers. They've brought it to us. So we are, it's normally done in London. We are 5 hours up north from London, and they brought it to a studio in our local area. And because they don't live there, then they're not interested in any of the food or ingredients because they're going back home on a train. So I've taken those ingredients and then used them to make some recipes with, and then promoted the cookbook as part of them, saying this was using leftovers
Oh,
from
that's
X
Oh,
cool.
that's
cookbook
smart.
kind of thing. So I've done a lot like that, and that's great because it's after the photo shoot, and it just becomes our meals for a few days whilst we're getting rid of the excess food.
That's really
Interesting. That's
cool.
smart. Yeah. So I think it's, with like with everything we do, it's just about working smarter, not harder, being strategic, trying to think through how you can, work once but gain twice on it.
Right. Right.
Yeah, that's very smart. Well, this has been so enlightening, Sam. You talked me out of it and you talked me into it a couple of
I
a
know.
couple of times. I'm not gonna lie. At one point, I'm like, yeah, I'm all in. And then another point, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm out. And then you say
Yeah.
something else, I'm like, I might be back in.
Well, I
Well,
think
the thing,
you said it best, Sam, is that you're like, you have to really want it. It's a
Yeah.
labor of love. So if it's something you really want to,
yeah,
it's doable.
yeah, I never wanted to do cookbooks. I saw it as a vanity thing for a lot of food bloggers. A lot of them wanted to be a published author. They were never talking about the money or any of the benefits of it. It was just, I just want my book in print. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do a cookbook. And I put it off for a while until I had an audience that I know I could sell it to.
Right.
Um, but it's one of those interesting things. But it's like the self-published versus the published thing that we all complain about. Is that you do end up losing a lot of control. You do not have a choice over what they put on the front page, the fonts that they use on the front page of the book. They'll give you some leeway when you say, "Oh, right, this would help sell it more." It depends whether or not you've got a decent publisher behind you, basically.
Right.
But one of the things that you have to think about when you're thinking about it is that, yeah, we can all sell digital products on our sites and things like that. But being with a good publisher, they can sell foreign copies of your book where it's passive income for doing absolutely nothing. I
Right.
mean, I just found out the other day that my first book, which has been out a few years now, is getting rewritten for the Hungarian market, and they've sold 3,000 copies. So, $1 a book or whatever from doing absolutely nothing.
Right.
And the same for getting you in shops and things. A publishing house can achieve that, you know,
Mhm.
and you just have to bite your tongue every now and again when things do get too much for you.
Right.
I think the big lesson I walked away with from today's conversation is to just be realistic about the timeline and
Hmm.
really look at that and see how that fits in with your life at the moment. Will it fit in? Do you have the time to put into it? And almost like what you said, Corinne, like it's like remodeling a house, right? You have to double the time and double the double the
Right.
budget, especially like the first time around, or
Right.
like you said, Sam, the fourth and fifth time around when you don't have a lot of that
Right.
pre-work already done.
No, this was
But
really helpful in terms of all those things I wouldn't have known
yeah,
to, because my books weren't cookbooks, so I wasn't part of the photo shoot at all. I don't even think that was an option for me. Like I wouldn't have known to even ask for that. So
right.
yeah, there's some little nuggets like that, especially in case you missed it while we were talking about it, looking for the agents that are thanked at the end of other books.
Yeah,
That
cookbooks you
was a nice
enjoy.
little golden nugget. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this was great, Sam. If our listeners want to know more about you or have questions, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Thank you. They can reach me over at kitchengadgetsclub.com. I'm on all the main social media channels, and I'm also on YouTube. And I'm quite happy to help anybody that wants to go down the published author route.
That's great. Maybe I'll be reaching out to you. I don't know. It depends on what mood I'm in or how hard I
Right.
want to work that week.
Yeah,
Thank you so
yeah.
much, Sam, for joining us today. Listeners, if you want to see like her cookbooks, we're going to link to them in the show notes, but she's got a couple out. Is your new one on pre-order already, Sam, or is that correct? The
Yeah,
complete
I'm
cookbook?
Yeah, I'm a crazy person, so I'm doing 2 cookbooks in 1 year.
Oh, wow.
So yes, one's
So
on
I
October, and she's working on another one that I guess is due. Your final stuff is due in September. So all these links will
yeah,
be in the show notes.
so
But by all means, check her out.
yeah.
Yes.
So
And of course,
I've got the complete multi-cooker cookbook. So that's the trademark free version of a Ninja Foodie cookbook. So that's out on the 26th of March. And then we've got the complete pressure cooker cookbook, and that's out in September. And that's basically the Instant Pot.
Awesome.
great. If today's episode gave you clarity, direction, or even just one solid aha moment, that's your cue to take action.
Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what's coming next. And if you found this helpful, please share it with a creator friend who needs to hear it. Smart creators build in communities.
And if you're ready to go deeper, whether that's through our mastermind, live events, or free resources, head to smartinfluencer.com and get on our list.
That's where we share the strategies, tools, and behind the scenes insights we don't always talk about on the podcast. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Now go build something smarter.